Hi guys, it's Henry from IFE. So today I want to talk about emerging markets. Now, over the last couple of years we've seen America dominate with the S&P 500 go up significantly, especially with the pandemic. And before that, it's all been about America first, as Trump's rhetoric goes. Now today I want to talk a bit about emerging markets, how they come to play in a portfolio, and why you can't overlook them with the current market conditions. So firstly, I just want to say a disclaimer, this isn't financial advice, it's just my personal opinion. So I'm going to go over some of the financial markets. Now, what is emerging markets? Now, it's actually quite a broad term. Normally it represents 6 countries. The MSCI World Eye has it as 24. Now these aren't normally have political instability, and a simple way of defining them is they're not as got the development or infrastructure of the West as a developed, stable political environment. I want to put a bit of a contradiction to that. When you look at the emerging markets, especially from an index perspective, they have a lot of Korea in them, Taiwan and China. Now, having lived in China, I can tell you some of the infrastructure is better than in the West. Some of the payment systems, Taiwan again, very clean place, got a reasonably stable government. Korea as well with their infrastructure. So it's a broad term, and that's what you kind of countries you'll get exposure to if you go into an emerging market ETF or index fund. So what are the risks? Of course, in a lot of these countries you've got political instability. And look at a few of the reports. 40% of Indian people that have been stopped by the police report getting it overturned by a bribe. We've seen recently in the UK with Matt Hancock scandal. This is kind of very small on what they have, say for example in the Malaysia scandal, the ex-Prime Minister, taking large amounts of bribes. China, there's been politicians with 13 billion in cash, 520 million pounds worth of gold in his house through bribes, and also Thailand as well with the coups, etc. So they do have a lot of instability in them, and that's obviously a part that you can't overlook when you're investing in these countries. So Buffett says the S&P first, and he's got a point with the stability that they've got. Now, I just want to go over a few of the facts of the figures of emerging markets. Now, 30 years ago, it was worth 1% of the market. Now it's worth 30% of the market. Sorry, it's worth 14% 30 years later. And it's predicted to go to 50% within the next 20 years. Now, that's an area you can't overlook, and you look at the size of the populations of the 2 biggest economies that make up the emerging markets, India, China, nearing 1.4 billion each. That's 36% of the world's population right there. And as well, they're innovating. So for every Amazon, you've got a Alibaba, you've got a Tencent, you've got a Baidu. You've got, or for everything you've got in America, you've got a Chinese equivalent. For every Tesla, you've got a NIO. It's quite significant. And with these populations going, we've talked a lot about Vietnam. They're going at 6, 7, even 10% in China's case a few years ago. % a year. The West could only dream about something like that, countries like that. These are countries that have a lot going for them. In terms of how it fits in your portfolio, again, for me personally, this isn't financial advice. I just put around a 20% in emerging markets. Now, I talked a bit about the ones that I've gone into. I've gone into the iShares Pacific, ex-Japan. It's not really too much of an emerging one, as it has a lot of Australia, Singapore in there as well, and New Zealand. So some of the ones that you can go into that are low cost is the iShares MSCI Emerging Market Index by BlackRock. Top holdings are TSMC. We've talked a lot about this on my blogs about the semiconductor industry, how it's going to be dominant over the next few years, and I think I've gone over a few of the financials of that company in a few of my blogs. I'll try to put a link in below for you as well. And then if you go down, you've got Tencent, Alibaba, Samsung. You look at all these, they're big holding companies. Tencent, we've talked a lot about that, and Alibaba looking to get into the Southeast Asian market. They've got growth of populations of 260 million in a place like Indonesia, 90 million in Vietnam, same in around the same in Philippines, with a growing market. And they're expanding their GDP 5-6% a year. Yes, it may take a bit of a hit because of the pandemic, but it's still a market that they've got room to expand in, and a vast one at that. And they're coming into kind of what China was, Vietnam, 20 years ago. So if they can get a hold with that, and which they have done, and they've set up regional offices in Singapore, I believe that can have a vast effect on that. So I'm not going to go into too much of the companies, but Samsung's actually, contradictory belief, is also a semiconductor business. That's where it gets its main profits from. Obviously, a lot of people think it's Apple. Actually works very closely with Apple, or did do prior to that. So it has a lot of future going for it. I have known from insiders that Samsung is quite a traditional company from a Korean perspective, but then if you look at any Korean or Japanese company in that way, I think it has the traditional values, but still believe it has the infrastructure to go. The other one is the Vanguard Emerging Market Stocks Index. Sorry. This has a TR of 0.22. Very similar kind of fund. It is large cap, has the Tencents, the Alibabas, the Samsung holding in it, and has that weighting towards China. Now, I've talked a lot about in the past about how you should use these. Should you go into small caps, do a lot of the emerging markets overweigh in China? Personally, yes, but it's not a bad thing. It's like a lot of the global markets outweigh in the US. If you do want smaller caps, there is some specific funds that you can go into, or you can also go into specific index ETF of countries. Now, we talked a lot last year about how we went into Mexico and believed that was undervalued, and how we've kept an eye on other emerging markets such as Vietnam and their index. So that's just a bit of a rundown about what my thoughts are on emerging markets index, how I think it will grow in the future, and how I use it. Again, it's not financial advice, it's not specific, it's just my personal view, and it doesn't constitute for anything. Hope you enjoyed that, guys. Hope you found it interesting. Feel free to let me know your thoughts. Thanks.